Today, I'm giving my review and thoughts on the third tech titan. You have Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, and yes, Masayoshi Son from SoftBank Japan. So, hello, my name is Zach. This channel is mostly science fiction and fantasy book reviews. But yes, I do read occasional business books as well as a little of everything else. So, the book I recently read and really enjoyed was Gambling Man: The Secret Story of the World's Greatest Disruptor, Masayoshi Son by Lionel Barber. This book came on my radar because, yes, SoftBank is in the news all the time, actually, with their Vision Fund, which you may have heard of, but most recently, in recording this in 2026, but at the end of 25, was their recent deals and workings into the AI. So they are deeply or trying to get deeply involved in NVIDIA, and they recently secured a round of funding for NVIDIA. So that led me down the path of, okay, I haven't actually read much about SoftBank and I wanted to learn more. And yeah, this book was the perfect biography of the third tech titan. So very interesting story. Masayoshi Son is a son of Korean parents, but born and raised in Japan. So that is the framing of the title of the book, both the Gambling Man and the Greatest Disruptor, because Son is a Zainichi, so he's, yes, ethnically Korean, born in Japan, and grew up in Japan. But then also, as we learned, yes, he went to California. So there's the tie-in that he goes and is brought up in this microprocessor revolution. So around the same time of other tech titans like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, he's studying in California, but he grows up in Japan as this outsider. So he starts off as an outsider. Koreans, of course, if you've heard, Japan is, yes, a very homogenous society. So being Korean in Japan, his family did have a tough time. He grew up from very humble beginnings. And one interesting thing is, yes, his family owned pachinko parlors, which are, yes, the gambling little steel balls. If you've ever seen pachinko, it's a very interesting sort of gambling sport. It's a way sort of to curb around the strict no gambling laws in Japan. So you like you wager on the pachinkos, then you trade them in for gifts. And his family owned that, so that's kind of the gambling tie-in. And that being the outsider, it sort of shaped who he was. So he does gamble. He takes big bets on companies and technologies, and we learn through his story, through Lionel Barber's telling, of how he was just always interested in tech. And the interesting framing is that he isn't so into tech like a Bill Gates. So he's not there coding long hours, growing up with a PC in his hand and learning the ins and out of software, or like Jobs cutting deals and then going on to be a visionary in hardware and design with Apple. So he is always on the outskirts. It's a very interesting framing and story that I hadn't heard about, other than, yes, I'd heard the name, but haven't heard the story. So the entire time that Son is growing up, he's very into tech. He loves tech, you can tell, but then he does businesses like adjacent to tech. So he does businesses into magazines that publish about tech. There's like a trade show business with tech. He's always in this like tech adjacent, but never actually writing software itself. And these bets and gambles on the industry that he sees as a visionary, or I guess that's the framing that we get from the book, that he's a visionary in that he believes in the power of tech, and he takes these bets on tech adjacent companies. And it's a gradual building of an empire into SoftBank, which is software distribution. So it's not a bank, I didn't know it has bank in the title, but it's a software bank where they were the largest distributor of software in Japan. And he was that key. So there's the Japan connection, that because he grew up not in Japan, but he studied in the United States, he had that connection to United States businesses, and he saw what was going on and what a disruptor that software and the California Silicon Valley revolution was going to have. And he was that key to bring it to Japan, to be the bridge. And he played that role for so many companies. And his charisma, which is another thing that really comes through in the book, is how much of a deal maker he was. And he's able to win people over based on his charisma and his vision into his getting in these deals and being the linchpin of this connector between the two countries, between different industries. And it builds this empire that starts in the software adjacent. He gets into telecom. So they're into phones and networks and on both sides of the ocean in the United States, in Japan. And he's just gradually building these empires. At the end of the day, we get to where we are now, the present, the Vision Fund. So SoftBank goes from, yes, this investor, empire builder, like a conglomerate, if you can imagine that in like a K drama, or yes, in Japan, these companies that own all these subsidiary companies, and he's just making bets on different industries. And we eventually get to the Vision Fund where Son goes into venture capital and funding all these different startups. And yes, famously, some failed. So the big famous you may know SoftBank from was um totally blanking, of course, was WeWork. So that was the big story in the book where he really believes in Adam Newman and the vision of WeWork, and he sees it as maybe as no disruptor. He's, as in Masayoshi Son, is wrapped into Newman's charisma, and they sort of play off each other, and he's drawn into that and sees WeWork as the disruptor. And so SoftBank invested heavily in Newman, and yeah, we all know kind of where WeWork went when it sort of collapsed. And then it's Son just taking his loss. So the moral of the story also is that he just takes these punches. It's not a totally glowing review of Masayoshi because, or review or biography of Masayoshi, because he didn't win all his bets. And that's what the life of a gambler is, I guess, that you don't win them all, but you swing with the punches and you get back up and try again. And that's kind of what Masayoshi does, that he keeps disrupting, he keeps on trucking, and he's going to try again and build himself back up. So it is a hopeful take in the end where we go to the present, and he sort of missed out on the AI rush at the time. He wasn't an early AI investor, so he was always playing in the areas and adjacent, but his rise isn't like, oh, he invested in OpenAI on the ground floor or anything like that. It's that he made some bets and lost some bets, notably WeWork, but he wasn't on the ground floor a lot of the unicorn startups. But he's always been there on the sidelines, building and growing his empire. And now in 25, 26, Masayoshi's really started to get into AI. He's now, seems from the end of the book, he sounds like he's all in on AI. And the news article that prompted me to get this is, yes, SoftBank and their Vision Fund 2 is ready to go all in on AI. So it seems like that's the next chapter for Masayoshi Son and SoftBank. And yeah, just overall, it was a very interesting book. This is also a book about a lot of deals. So it's not so much a book. Well, not so much. It is a book about the person. So it's about Masayoshi and his deal making, but we do hear a lot of buying and selling and the trade and the business side. So it's not a tech book is the way I was going to say. This is more, yes, a business book about the tech industry. So if you're looking for that perspective on the tech industry and deal making and mergers and acquisitions, this book is really about mergers and acquisitions. Once we get to the point where Masayoshi has grown his empire enough to be in sort of the merger acquisition phase of it, not just growing from pachinko parlors, and he started building his empire. So it does have a lot of business heavy, especially towards like the later half of the book when we get to that part of the story. But overall, I enjoyed it as a business book, and someone, yes, who's interested in tech. Thought it was really interesting to learn about this third titan of tech. But you have in the book, he's also called the Japanese Bill Gates. And that's immediately what I thought, just hearing the story of where he was in the time period. That's even before they said in the book, that's what I was like, oh yeah, this sounds like a Bill Gates story almost. It's that rags to riches, but being there right at the right place, right time, and making the right moves in these early days of the microprocessor revolution. So very interesting. I found it informative, a book that really doesn't teach you business. It just teaches you about the person, about the philosophy. So you're not going to learn Masayoshi's secrets or what it takes, but other than just this is the guy who did all these cool things and this is his life story, and he's just going to keep on betting, rolling the dice, and making the best he can for SoftBank and for his company. So very interesting. I enjoyed it. So do give it a read if you're interested as well. Gambling Man, The Secret Story of the World's Greatest Disruptor, Masayoshi Son by Lionel Barber. Thanks for watching and have a great day.